Hey everybody, sorry that this is a little bit late, given the circumstances of the storms this past weekend. We didn't have power until yesterday evening, and today, this afternoon on Wednesday, was the first chance that I've got to record a lesson. I'm sure all of you were waiting on pins and needles for this. Just to kind of reset where we're at, there are 2 assignments on Google Classroom right now. Thank You Ma'am by Langston Hughes, and then Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut. If you could get those turned in as quickly as possible. I know some of you were affected by the storms. If I can do anything to help you out, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you have a situation where you're still recovering from that or whatever, I am not evil enough to be overbearing about your assignments. Just try to get those in as quick as you can. If it's late, it's late. I mean, there's not much I can do if you're in a bad circumstance because of storm damage or things like that. If you're able to get it done, please get it done as quickly as possible. If you've got to have a little extra time for because of the storms or anything like that, just get it in when you can. And if I can do anything to help you out, please let me know. We were fortunate here. We didn't really we lost power for a couple days, and that's about it. And compared to what I've seen just driving around and when I've got out the past few days, I'm fortunate in that. Some of you may not have been quite so fortunate, and if you need anything, like I said, let me know. I think that's the 3rd time I've said that now. If you need more time for your assignments, absolutely. You do what you can. So we have the 2 assignments that we've got already. A 3rd will be today. You're not going to have any questions on this story today. It's going to be a paragraph, a little writing sample, and then after this week, moving into next week, first off, we're going to have a new short story next week that's going to be a little bit longer, and I'm going to do the thing where I interrupt for just a second and patch the video together later, because if I don't, somebody's going to call me and interrupt this lesson, so it will be literally no time to you and a few seconds to me. And we're back, but for you, I never left, so whatever. So kind of resetting where I was. There'll be some questions. There'll be a writing selection for this story that we have today that I'll get to in a second. Next week, we're going to start probably my favorite short story that I teach all year. We'll dive into that more next week. It's a little bit longer, so what's probably going to happen with that is there will be 3 videos concerning next week's lesson. There will be one concerning the story itself, where I don't really dive into a lot of the literary elements, into the symbolism or the foreshadowing, any type of literary element we talked about in class. We won't go over that in the initial video. It'll be like me reading the story with resets every now and then to make sure we're all on the same page what's happening. After that, I'll put out another video that goes over the literary elements of the story, some of the symbolism, and then the last video will be a nonfiction article, which is the inspiration for the story, and that'll all make more sense next week. And if we get a chance, we're going to do some Google Meets tomorrow, which in this case would be Thursday, and Friday. And if I get a chance to talk about that, then I will. But besides that, we'll go ahead and dive into what we have for today. Today's short story is The Lady or the Tiger by Frank Stockton. Frank Stockton was late 1800s, died in the early 1900s, American author, sort of around the same time as Mark Twain. So if you've ever read or seen any adaptation of Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer, those are some stories by Mark Twain. You may not be familiar with those, but around the same time. But the story is kind of told as almost like a fairy tale, so it's timeless in a sense. This story, compared to the one we read last week, is actually shorter in page number, but the printout I have, the font is a little bit smaller. So we'll go through and read this story, and then there's some questions. There is a question up on Google Classroom that you can find later. So we'll dive into it. The link is on the Google Classroom for The Lady or the Tiger by Frank Stockton. In the very olden time, there lived a semi-barbaric king, whose ideas, though somewhat polished and sharpened by the progressiveness of distant Latin neighbors, were still large, florid, and untrammeled, as became the half of him which was barbaric. He was a man of exuberant fancy, and, withal, of an authority so irresistible that, at his will, he turned his varied fancies into facts. He was greatly given to self-communing, and, when he and himself agreed upon anything, the thing was done. When every member of his domestic and political systems moved smoothly in its appointed course, his nature was bland and genial. But whenever there was a little hitch, and some of his orbs got out of their orbits, he was blander and more genial still, for nothing pleased him so much as to make the crooked straight and crush down uneven places. Among the borrowed notations by which his barbarism had been semified was that of the public arena, by which, in exhibitions of manly and beastly valor, the minds of his subjects were refined and cultured. But even here, the exuberant and barbaric fancy asserted itself. The arena of the king was built, not to give the people an opportunity of hearing the rhapsodies of dying gladiators, nor to enable them to view the inevitable conclusion of a conflict between religious opinions and hungry jaws, but for purposes far better adapted to widen and develop the mental energies of people. This vast amphitheater, with its encircling galleries, its mysterious vaults, and its unseen passages, was an agent of poetic justice, in which crime was punished, or virtue rewarded, by the decrees of an impartial and incorruptible chance. When a subject was accused of a crime of sufficient importance to interest the king, public notice was given that on an appointed day, the fate of the accused person would be decided in the king's arena. A structure which well deserved its name, for, although its form and plan were borrowed from afar, its purpose emanated solely from the brain of this man, who, every barleycorn a king, knew no tradition to which he owed more allegiance than pleased his fancy, and who engrafted on every adopted form of human thought and action the rich growth of his barbaric idealism. So let me translate all that just a little bit for you, okay? What we have here is being referred to as a semi-barbaric king. And if he's barbaric, it means he goes back to being a barbarian, okay? This brute who has no regard for the human mind. He's only concerned with strength, seeks only to destroy, to kill, just this barbaric person who values power above everything and things like that. That's what we have in this king, although he's referred to as semi-barbaric, which means he is educated, he's able to create this political process, but there's still this side of him that values power above anything else. There's still this part of him that is just a little bit what you might call sadistic. What he might be interested in seeing an execution carried out. He might be interested in the more brutish, physically conquering aspects of being a king. So you have like this half-refined, half-educated man living in a somewhat modern time, but at the same time, on the other end, there's still this barbaric side. And we see this in this arena that he's built. And this arena is to carry out punishments for crimes, which is what we're fixing to look at. When all the people had assembled in the galleries, and the king, surrounded by his court, sat high on his throne of royal state on one side of the arena, he gave a signal. A door beneath him opened, and the accused subject stepped out into the amphitheater. Directly opposite him, on the other side of the enclosed space, were two doors, exactly alike and side by side. It was the duty and the privilege of the person on trial to walk directly to these doors and open one of them. He could open either door he pleased. He was subject to no guidance or influence but that of the aforementioned impartial and incorruptible chance. If he opened the one, there came out of it a hungry tiger, the fiercest and most cruel that can be procured, which immediately sprang upon him and tore him to pieces as punishment for his guilt. The moment that the case of the criminal was thus decided, doleful iron bells were clanged. Great wails went up from the hired mourners posted on the outer rim of the arena, and the vast audience, with bowed heads and downcast hearts, wended slowly their homeward way, mourning greatly that one so young and fair, or so old and respected, should have merited so dire a fate. But if the accused person opened the other door, there came forth from it a lady, the most suitable to his years and station that his majesty could select among his fair subjects, and to this lady he was immediately married as a reward of his innocence. It mattered not that he might already possess a wife and family, or that his affections might be engaged upon the object of his own selection. The king allowed no such subordinate arrangements to interfere with his great scheme of retribution and reward. The exercises, as in the other instance, took place immediately and in the arena. Another door opened beneath the king, and a priest, followed by a band of choristers and dancing maidens, blowing joyous airs on golden horns, entreating an epithalamic measure, advanced to where the pair stood, side by side, and the wedding was promptly and cheerily solemnized. Then the gay brass bells rang forth their merry peals, and the people shouted glad hurrahs, and the innocent man, preceded by children strewing flowers on his path, led his bride to his home. So, here's just a quick suggestion for you. If you struggle with reading, do not become an English teacher. But that is the choice that the king offers anyone who's accused of a crime. And it actually reminds me back of like when you hear the Salem witch trials, where they would say they would tie a boulder to an accused witch, throw them off a bridge, and if they drowned, they were innocent, and if they floated to the top and survived, they were clearly a witch. It kind of reminds me of that in some ways, but you have a situation here where if you're accused of a crime, you're put in this giant arena. The king walks you out in front of anybody. There's two doors in front of you. Behind one of them is a bride that you will be married to immediately, whether you like it or not. Behind the other, there is a hungry tiger who is ready to take a bite out of you as quickly as possible. Now, at this point, I could make a Tiger King joke. I could make a Carol Baskin's husband joke. I could make a wide variety of jokes about modern things. I'm going to skip all. I'm a little bit better than that, so I'm not going to do that. We'll just move on with the story. So that is how the king took care of anyone who was accused of a crime. You would walk out. You had a 50-50 chance. Do you open the door and find a lady to marry, or do you open it to find a hungry tiger which will immediately maul you in front of the entire country, town, whatever? Those of you that are sitting there asking, well, what if a woman was accused of a crime? Would she have a... Well, it's not in the story because the story was written in the late 1800s. And, yeah, you didn't want to be a woman back then, and they didn't really care about that aspect of things. So, look, this is the way it was. Don't look at me like that. This was the king's semi-barbaric method of administering justice. Its perfect fairness is obvious. The criminal could not know out of which door would come the lady. He opened either pleased, without having the slightest idea whether in the next instant he was to be devoured or married. On some occasions, the tiger came out of one door, and on some, out of the other. The decisions of this tribunal were not only fair, they were positively determinate, and the accused person was either instantly punished if he found himself guilty, or if innocent, he was rewarded on the spot, whether he liked it or not. There was no escape from the judgments of the king's arena. The institution was a very popular one. And when the people gathered together on one of the great trial days, they never knew whether they were to witness a bloody slaughter or a hilarious wedding. The element of uncertainty lent an interest to the occasion which it could not have otherwise attained. I'm temporarily distracted because my back hurts and I'm trying to get comfortable here, but I'm good now, so we'll carry on. Thus the masses were entertained and pleased, and the thinking part of the community could bring no charge of unfairness against this plan, for did not the accused person have the whole matter in his own hands? The semi-barbaric king had a daughter, as blooming as his most florid fancies, and with a soul as fervent and imperious as his own. So now we're moving on to the princess, the king's daughter. As usual in such cases, she was the apple of his eye, and was loved by him above all humanity. Among his courtiers was a young man of that fineness of blood and lowness of station common to the conventional heroes of romance who love royal maidens. This royal maiden was well satisfied with her lover, for he was handsome and brave to a degree unsurpassed in all this kingdom, and she loved him with an ardor that had enough of barbarism, again, don't become an English teacher if you can't read, in it to make exceedingly warm and strong. This love affair moved on happily for many months until one day the king discovered its existence. He did not hesitate nor waver in regard to his duty in the premises. The youth was immediately cast into prison, and a day was appointed for his trial in the king's arena. This, of course, was an especially important occasion, and His Majesty, as well as all people, was greatly interested in the workings and the development of this trial. Never before had such a case occurred. Never before had a subject dared to love the daughter of the king. In after years, such things became commonplace enough. But then they were in no slight degree novel and startling. So, what we have here is a classic love story, a classic fairy tale love story. You have this gentleman of the court, this lowly man that, although he's good looking, he's charming, he's intelligent, he's not good enough for the king's daughter. He's not good enough for the princess. The princess loves him. Now, the princess is, as we'll see moving forward, just a little bit like her father when it comes to the barbaric nature that she has. We'll get to that more in a little bit. But they are in love. And then the king finds out. Now, obviously, this man has loved the princess. There is no way that this is acceptable. There is no way that this can go on. So he is sentenced and a trial date is started. He is going to the arena and he will have to choose between two doors. But one which will have a lady and one which will have a tiger. But there is another twist that is coming. The tiger cages of the kingdom were searched for the most savage and relentless beasts, from which the fiercest monster might be selected for the arena. And the ranks of maiden youth and beauty throughout the land were carefully surveyed by competent judges in order that the young man might have a fitting bride in case fate did not determine for him a different destiny. Of course, everybody knew that the deed with which the accused was charged had been done. He loved the princess, and neither he, she, nor anyone else thought of denying the fact. But the king would not think of allowing any fact of this kind to interfere with the workings of the tribunal, in which he took such great delight and satisfaction. No matter how the affair turned out, the youth would be disposed of, and the king would take an aesthetic pleasure in watching the course of events, which would determine whether or not the young man had done wrong in allowing himself to love the princess. So, he's either going to have a tiger waiting for him behind the door, or is he's going to have a different young lady than the princess. So regardless of what's going on, the king's problem is solved. The appointed day arrived. From far and near the people gathered and thronged the great galleries of the arena, and crowds, unable to gain admittance, massed themselves against its outer walls. The king and his court were in their places, opposite the twin doors, those fateful portals so terrible in their similarity. All was ready. The signal was given. The door beneath the royal party opened, and the lover of the princess walked into the arena. Tall, beautiful, fair, his appearance was greeted with a low hum of admiration and anxiety. Half the audience had not known so grand a youth had lived among them. No wonder the princess loved him. What a terrible thing for him to be there. As the youth advanced into the arena, he turned, as the custom was, to bow to the king. But he did not think at all of that royal personage. His eyes were fixed upon the princess, who sat to the right of her father. Had it not been for the moiety of barbarism in her nature, it is possible that the lady would not have been there. But her intense and fervid soul would not allow her to be absent on an occasion in which she was so terribly interested. From the moment that the decree had gone forth that her lover should decide his fate in the king's arena, she had thought of nothing, night or day, that this great event in various subjects connected with. Possessed of more power, influence, and force of character than anyone who had ever been interested in such a case, she had done what no other person had done. She had possessed herself of the secrets of the doors. She knew in which of the two rooms that lay behind those doors stood the cage of the tiger with its open front, and in which waited the lady. Through these thick doors, heavily curtained with skins on the inside, it was impossible that any noise or suggestion should come from within to the person who approached to raise the latch of one of them. But gold, and the power of a woman's will, had brought the secret to the princess. So the princess knows. First off, she's in the arena. She's there to watch this happen. She's there to see whether this man that she loves is going to be mauled by a tiger or married to someone else. Why would she put herself through that? Why would she risk seeing who she loved mauled by a tiger? Well, just like her father, there is a little bit of that barbaric nature in her. There is a little bit of a desire to see what is going to happen. She has an interest in this. So she may not be half or semi-barbaric like the king is, but that same blood goes through her veins. That same interest is there in her, and she's just a little bit barbaric, just like her father. She knows what's behind the doors. She's been able to figure it out. And not only did she know in which room stood the lady ready to emerge, all blushing and radiant should her door be opened, but she knew who the lady was. It was one of the fairest and loveliest of the damsels of the court, which had been selected as the reward of the accused youth, should he be proven innocent of the crime of aspiring to one so far above him. And the princess hated her. Often had she seen, or imagined that she had seen, this fair creature throwing glances of admiration upon the person of her lover, and sometimes she thought those glances were perceived and even returned. Now and then she had seen them talking together. It was but for a moment or two, but much can be said in a brief space. It may have been on most unimportant topics, but how could she know that? The girl was lovely, but she had dared to raise her eyes to the loved one of the princess. And with all the intensity of the savage blood transmitted to her through long lines of wholly barbaric ancestors, she hated the woman who blushed and trembled behind that silent door. When her lover turned and looked at her, his eyes met hers as she sat there, paler and whiter than anyone in the vast ocean of anxious faces about her. He saw, by the power of quick perception which is given to those whose souls are one, that she knew behind which door crouched the tiger and behind which stood the lady. He had expected her to know it. He understood her nature, and his soul was assured that she would never rest until she made plain to herself this thing, hidden to all other lookers on, even to the king. The only hope for the youth in which there was any element of certainty was based upon the success of the princess in discovering this mystery. And the moment he looked upon her, he knew she had succeeded. As in his soul, he knew she would succeed. So what you have here is you have a princess who has found out which door has the tiger, which door has the lady. But you also have a princess who knows who the lady is. And it's not just anybody random. It's somebody from her court. It's somebody who's around her a lot. It is a beautiful young lady. It is someone who she feels has been checking out her lover, who she feels has been familiar with him, who she thinks she is even perceived that has been flirting with him from time to time. So she is not in a space where she wants to see this woman married to the man that's standing on trial. We'll get on moving forward. He knows, the boy that's having to make the choice, the young man that's having to make the choice, knows that she knows which door has the tiger and which has the lady. And he is looking at her for any of advice. Let's go on from there. Then it was his quick and anxious glance which asked the question, which? It was as plain to her as if he shouted it from where he stood. There was not an instant to be lost. The question was asked in a flash. It must be answered in another. Her right arm laid on the cushioned parapet before her. She raised her hand and made a slight, quick movement toward the right. This is my right, I guess. This way. No one but her lover saw her. Every eye was fixed on the man in the arena. He turned, and with a firm and rapid step, he walked across the empty space. Every heart stopped beating. Every breath was held. Every eye was fixed immovably upon that man. Without the slightest hesitation, he went to the door on the right and opened it. Now, the point of the story is this. Did the tiger come out of that door, or did the lady? The more we reflect upon this question, the harder it is to answer. It involves a study of the human heart, which leads us through devious mazes of passion, out of which it is difficult to find our way. Think of it, fair reader, not as if the decision of the question depended upon yourself, but upon that hot-blooded, semi-barbaric princess, her soul at a white heat beneath the combined fires of despair and jealousy. She had lost him, but who should have him? How often in her waking hours and in her dreams had she started in wild horror and covered her face with her hands at the thought of her lover opening the door on the other side of which waited the cruel fangs of the tiger? But how much oftener had she seen him at the other door? How, in her grievous reveries, had she gnashed her teeth, torn her hair, and when she saw his start of rapturous delight as he opened the door of the lady? How her soul had burned in agony when she had seen him rush to meet that woman with her flushing cheek and sparkling eyes of triumph. When she had seen him lead her forth, his whole frame kindled with the joy of recovered life. Which she had heard the glad shouts from the multitude and the wild ringing of the happy bells. When she had seen the priest, with his joyous followers, advance to the couple and make them man and wife before her very eyes. And when she had seen them walk away together upon their path of flowers, followed by the tremendous shouts of the hilarious multitude, in which her one despairing shriek was lost and drowned. Would it not be better for him to die at once and go to wait for her in the blessed regions of semi-barbaric futurity? And yet that awful tiger, those shrieks, that blood. Her decision had been indicated in an instant, but she had made it after days and nights of anguished deliberation. She had known she would be asked. She had decided what she would answer, and without the slightest hesitation, she had moved her hand to the right. The question of her decision is not one to be lightly considered, and it is not for me to presume to set myself up as the one person able to answer it. And so, I leave it with all of you, which came out of the open door, the lady or the tiger. Yep, that's the end. That's how the story ends, with this speculation as to which choice the princess made for the young man. So here's her choice. Does she see the person she loved mauled to death by a tiger in front of her. His life ended. Or does she see the person that she loved married to another person, married to another woman in front of her? What choice does she make? Because she's the one making the choice. Now, here is the idea that I would offer up to you. You make the decision. You get to decide what was behind the door. What did she choose for the young man, the lady or the tiger? Now, my question would be, are you thinking how the princess would think? Are you referring to her semi-barbaric nature? Which is, again, semi-barbaric. Not entirely. There's still a human being in there. Does it suggest more about us as readers, what we decide? Or does it suggest more about you? I repeated myself there because there's stomping going on above my head from my son running back and forth. So let's reset and ask that question again, because I'm 28 minutes into this and I'm not going to do it again just for the sake of getting it right. Does it say more about the princess or does it say more about the reader? Is the question that I'm trying to pose. Does it say more about the princess making her semi-barbaric choice? Or does whatever choice you make for her, does it say more about your mindset? Does it say more about my mindset if I decide that she would pick the tiger? Does that mean that I'm kind of semi-barbaric? Does that mean that my thought process is the same? If I say that she would pick the lady for her lover to marry, does that say that I'm naive? Does that say that I believe that everything's all happy and cheerful and deserves a Disney ending? I don't know. That's the question that Frank Stockton leaves to the readers at the end of this story. Which was behind the door? The lady or the tiger? Your writing assignment on Google Classroom this week is the same question. 5 sentences, write me a paragraph, support the choice that you make. You have 2 choices, the lady or the tiger. Whichever you choose is up to you. Does that say more about you, the reader, or does it say more about the princess? After you finish the assignment, please make sure that you go ahead and submit the assignment in the classwork tab on Google Classroom. Make sure that you turn in the assignment, even if there's not a form or attachment to go with it. I'm using a form, so I'm getting all of your answers separately. So what I need you to do is, even after you fill the form out, go back to Google Classroom and click Turn In on Assignment. If it says like, do you want to turn this in with a no attachment? Yes, you do. That's what I'm asking you to do right now. Your forms will go to a separate place to me. Your answers on your form will go to a separate place to me. And then your assignment will be turned in. It's just an easier way for me to keep up with things and see who's doing work and who's not. This is Wednesday night, the 15th. I think it's the 15th. All my days have started running together at this point. I will be sending out invitations for a Google Meet tonight to everybody. Hopefully I'll see some of you there. And if not, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. And that's all I got for you today. I look forward to seeing you. I just did air quotes. I look forward to seeing you again the next time. Miss y'all. Bye.